Hi, everyone, and welcome to the final class in our free class series that we ran this summer. Today's class is called Dietary Interventions for Adrenal Health, and I'm really excited about this one because it's something that anybody can utilize and take this information and really start to change their health and their life for the better. So let's go ahead and dive in. Class is being recorded today, so you will get a copy of the recording after this. And what I'm going to do now is just take a quick moment to share my slides for you. So give me just a second here. Okay. Now, if you're having any problems seeing the slides, just pop it in the chat, let me know. And otherwise, we'll just get started here. Okay, great. So again, today's class is called Key Dietary Interventions in Adrenal Fatigue, and let's dive in because this is going to be a great class. This is just a little something that my lawyer makes me say. All of the information I'm providing is educational, which is something that I love to do. I love the idea of empowerment through education. So teaching these classes is really a joy for me, but this is not to be construed as medical advice. Okay, so here's a quick breakdown of what we're going to go through today. We'll start by talking about what are our adrenal glands, what do they do, and then what is this thing called adrenal fatigue, which we're hearing more and more in the world because it's becoming more and more recognized. Finally, it's a lot more common than we have realized. And so what I've done is made a career out of talking about it because I think it's really, really critical and it's not talked about enough, especially not in women's health. Okay, so who am I and why am I even talking about this? My name is Dr. Emilie Wilson. I'm a naturopathic doctor and an acupuncturist, and I'm practicing locally in Prescott, Arizona. And I do have virtual medicine services as well that I offer to residents of Arizona and Washington. And then we also run classes and group programs for folks across the country. I founded a couple of companies, Sanos Skincare and Sanos Anti-Aging Medicine. And in this year, 2021, what I did was I combined them because what I really wanted to do was to create a full platform for women struggling with adrenal fatigue to provide them resources, references, as well as one-on-one care if they would like that, to help get them out of adrenal fatigue. And to that end, I have created a new entity and a new one-stop website called Sanos Wellness. And so again, that's Sanos Wellness. You can find us at sanoswellness.com, and I'm also on Instagram at Sanos Wellness. And I provide a lot of free information there as well. So that's a great place to find me. Okay, so let's dive in. What is adrenal fatigue? And adrenal fatigue is recognized in functional medicine. And the way that I like to think about it, and the way that I ask my patients to think about it too, is that it's not just a physical issue. It's a crisis, and it expands out from our physical health, and it also impacts our emotional health, our mental health, and for most women, also our spiritual health. And I think for me, that's something that really differentiates me and what I can offer women, because I really believe that when we're talking about adrenal health, we absolutely have to be considering who we are, not just physically, but also mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. You'll hear me say too that adrenal fatigue is a crisis in women's health. And I very much believe that. And we'll talk a little bit more about why. But I wanted to start by breaking this down for you, because if you go to your Western medicine doctor, that's for most of us our primary care provider, and we run down the list of symptoms of how we've been feeling. I'm exhausted, I can't focus, I have brain fog all the time. I've gained 20 pounds in my belly and I can't lose it. I'm not sleeping well, I'm not digesting. You might get a diagnosis of IBS or depression. But outside of that, they're not going to give you a diagnosis of adrenal fatigue, because adrenal fatigue is a condition that's recognized in functional medicine, but not in the more typical Western allopathic model. And one of the reasons that I wanted to start talking about this really full time was, in my practice over the years, I have sat down with multiple women who have listed these symptoms out to me. And they have gone to their doctors already, told their doctors how they've been feeling. And again, they've gotten a diagnosis, usually of depression, and were offered an antidepressant, and that was it. And that kills me, because there's so much more going on, and there's so much that we can do to help them, to help women who are struggling with this. But first, we need to recognize what's going on. A lot of times in adrenal fatigue, the blood tests that your Western doctor would run, they're not going to catch anything. So they're going to take a look at the blood test. They may or may not do a physical exam, and they're going to say, you're perfectly healthy. There's nothing wrong. It's all in your head. And I've heard that too many times from women as well, that their doctors have told them that. And it's just not true, because there's a lot going on physiologically inside of our bodies that just manifests out into affecting our mental health, our emotional health, and, as I mentioned, our spiritual health as well. So if we talk about what is adrenal fatigue, I'm going to first point you to the green rectangle here in the upper right-hand side. I'm going to try and move my screen here a little bit, see if we can get you. Okay. So we'll move that for just a second, because I want you to see, this is the typical Western allopathic model of health and disease. And there's a very clear line drawn in the sand. So if your labs say one thing, you're healthy. But if your labs say another thing, okay, now you have a disease, you have something we can diagnose. And so it's very black and white. The problem here is that it doesn't take into account functional issues that are causing real problems in people's lives. So again, a woman can be exhausted. She can have digestive issues. She might not be sleeping very well. She might be, as I mentioned, she might have gained 20 pounds, can't lose it. She feels terrible, but she goes to her doctor, and her doctor says, hey, your labs look great. You fall into the green box. You're healthy. And again, that's just not true. We need a better model of health versus illness that's going to help us describe and understand what's going on for these people who might look healthy on paper, but who feel terrible. And so now, if we look at the green triangle on the lower left side of the slide here, you'll see this is the functional medicine and the naturopathic medicine model of health and wellness. So we still have our green box, which is health, but the difference here is that when you're living from that green box, sure, our labs look great, of course, but the difference is that we feel great too. We have energy, we're digesting our food, our metabolism is working appropriately, we're loving our life, we're happy, we're healthy, we're sleeping, we're resting, we're engaging with people. And so that's really a model of health that is what we would expect if we thought of what a healthy person looks like, does, and how they behave in the world. You'll see that we do still have our red box here, disease. And in this model, it's going to be the same as in the Western allopathic model. So a person with a diagnosable disease in this model is still going to have, their labs are going to be off. There are going to be physical problems going on that we can really point to and address, either with medications or with more natural therapies as appropriate. The difference is that in this model, we also have that big purple box, and that box is where all of the folks that have what's called a functional imbalance would fall. And these are the people whose typical Western labs look fine, but they don't feel well. So again, they're exhausted, they have brain fog, they're not sleeping well, they're not digesting their food, they might be depressed, they might be going through mood swings, and they can't figure out what's going on. And so what we do, and what I do as a naturopathic doctor practicing functional medicine, is I start to do a whole different series of tests, because what I want to know is, where is the imbalance lying? And there are functional medicine tests that we can run that go much deeper than the tests that you would be given in a typical Western healthcare model. All right, so we'll bring this back up. Okay, so adrenal fatigue would fall into that big purple box. So it's a functional imbalance, and it's something that when we start digging deeper and we look at the issues from a functional medicine perspective, the issues that a woman is having, and we start doing these different functional medicine tests, then we start to uncover what's really going on. What we often find is that at the root of everything, she's suffering from adrenal fatigue. And so adrenal fatigue, I always tell people, is a functional imbalance, or it's a state. It's an unhealthy, unhappy state of being, but it's not technically a disease. We do not have that person living in the red box. Adrenal fatigue is often caused by things like drugs, and that can be medications, or it can be illegal drugs. Chronic stress is a huge one. We're not talking about it enough. We're not doing enough about it. Infections, chronic infections, and we're seeing this more and more in people as we find that people have more and more chronic infections. Chronic nutrient deficiencies. So if she hasn't been eating well for a long time, we see this a lot. Women who are very busy, very driven, they will drive themselves to go, 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 and to be perfect for everyone else and for everything else in their lives. But it's usually at the cost of their health. And a lot of times a big piece here is her diet starts to fall to the wayside. Poor sleep is another thing that can put us into adrenal fatigue. And then correcting this, again, not a disease, it's an imbalance. And so what we do is we use lifestyle therapies. There's no magic bullet here. There's no perfect pill or perfect prescription that can take a person from being in adrenal fatigue back to being in a state of vibrant health. It's really about getting the self-care pieces in place. But we want to do this not only because she's been suffering for a long time, and she's usually starting to feel very alone and alienated because of it, especially if she's already been told by her doctor or by a well-meaning family member that it's all in your head. So she begins to feel more and more alienated, but we need to address it, not just because she's living like this, and because she's living like this would be reason enough. But typically when we have somebody living in a state of a functional imbalance, that can easily progress to a more serious disease or a health complication, and we want to avoid that at all costs. I also like to teach people this because I think it's really, really important that adrenal fatigue is not a state of tired adrenals. So it's not that you've burned your adrenal glands out. It's a lot more complicated than that. And it's because our bodies are so beautiful, and they really like to function in a state of balance and harmony. And adrenal fatigue is an imbalance. So adrenal fatigue is not a state of tired adrenals, it's a state of a tired person. And it happens over time because the person's body, their physiology, so adrenal glands and their brain and nervous system have gotten altered physically and in the way that they work. They've been altered by being in a state of chronic stress for so long, and by being chronically exposed to higher levels of stress hormones than they should have been exposed to. One of the beautiful things about our bodies and our adrenal glands is that they will regenerate with proper care. Somebody who has adrenal fatigue, but is otherwise, physically speaking, is otherwise healthy, they can reverse that. And the difference here is with adrenal fatigue, they can reverse that. Their adrenal glands will regenerate with proper care. But in something like Addison's disease is a recognized disease state. So a person there would go to their doctor and be diagnosed with Addison's disease. And that's actually very, very serious and requires medical supervision, because it can result in a medical emergency, or potentially a life-threatening medical emergency if it's not handled appropriately. So that's a very different picture than adrenal fatigue, which is what we're talking about here. So what are some signs and symptoms? How would a woman even know that she has adrenal fatigue? The symptoms and signs can vary, and they do vary from person to person, and they can manifest anywhere in the body. So it does depend on how long the condition has been going on, how long has she been exposed to these chronically elevated stress hormones, and where is it affecting her body more. Now, the picture of adrenal fatigue can have a lot of crossovers with conditions like fibromyalgia, PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, chronic fatigue syndrome, and metabolic syndrome. And oftentimes we'll find that people who have conditions like this also have an underlying adrenal issue. We also will often see imbalances in thyroid hormones and female hormones when we're talking about adrenal fatigue. That's why I like to look at the big picture. A lot of autoimmune conditions are also going to drive the process of adrenal fatigue. So again, we need to look big picture at what's going on for her. Now, I mentioned that the symptoms can kind of pop up anywhere in the body. And this is a list of some of the big ones. So daytime fatigue, with or without insomnia. If you've ever heard of the term wired but tired. So a woman can be exhausted all day, dragging herself through her day. But then at night, she goes to fall asleep. Her head hits the pillow and boom, all of a sudden she's wide awake. She can't fall asleep. Her mind is usually racing. And for a lot of us, that looks like our to-do list, all the things we didn't get done today, all the things we have to do tomorrow, the things that keep us up at night when we should be resting. We often see central weight gain, especially belly fat that's really hard to lose. We see brain fog. We see a lot of digestive issues. I've seen a lot of women who've gone to their primary care doctor and not only gotten a diagnosis of depression, but usually IBS is in the picture too at that point, if she's already seen her doctor. And that's because she has digestive issues. She's maybe constipated or has loose stool, or maybe she's going back and forth. Gas, bloating, appetite changes. That's a big one too. A woman might initially start to crave more foods, especially she might notice that she has cravings for salt, sugar, carbs, and then stimulants, things like caffeine. So she's kind of got to have her coffee. And then as she goes farther down the road of adrenal fatigue, we tend to see appetite diminishing. And that's because the digestive system has been in shutdown mode for so long that her appetite is now decreased. She doesn't get hungry as much anymore. So it's a lot easier to forget to eat or skip meals. And this is actually not a good thing. It's not something that we want. I mentioned mood a couple of times. Depression, anxiety are big pieces of the picture. A lot of times women will cycle through those feelings. And then apathy is another big one too. So many women, so many of my patients have gotten to the point where they're like, you know what, I just don't care anymore. I used to be really upset about the fact that I was so exhausted I couldn't connect with my partner, and now I just don't care. You know, I'm just trying to get through the day. I'm just trying to get things taken care of at work. I'm trying to get things taken care of at home. I'm trying to get the kids taken care of. And I just, at this point, I'm just over, you know, being upset about not being able to enjoy this person who's in my life. And that's huge too. That's a big problem because life is short. We're supposed to be enjoying our life, and we want to enjoy it with the people that we're closest to and the people that are most important to us. And so for me, that's a huge driver in my wanting to help people heal from adrenal fatigue, because we need to be able to enjoy the people in our lives. That's really what it comes down to. It's one of the most important and special things we have. To finish off this list, so I'll switch gears for just a second, but going back to some of the physical issues of adrenal fatigue, blood sugar issues. So we might see hypoglycemia, but we all often see hyperglycemia. So that's high blood sugar. A lot of women who are otherwise pretty healthy can go into a pre-diabetic state. And that's because our adrenal glands, the stress hormones that they pump out, one of their functions is actually to raise blood sugar. And so a woman who's otherwise healthy, and I see this pretty regularly, might have high blood sugar. And again, pre-diabetes, her doctor's telling her, takes one look at the labs and says, you got to eat better, you got to exercise more. She's like, but I exercise 5 days a week, or I don't eat very much. I never eat this or that. And so there's a lot of confusion as to what's going on. And oftentimes what I find is that it's because of her of adrenal fatigue and of chronically elevated stress hormones pushing that blood sugar up higher than it should be. We'll also often see changes in blood pressure that can be high blood pressure, low blood pressure, or can fluctuate. We see things like headaches, muscle aches, easy fatigability. So maybe she used to be able to walk for 3 miles and feel great, but now she's walking for 2 and she's exhausted. That's a big sign too. Menstrual changes, difficult transition into menopause, those are huge. So we do want to make sure that a woman's adrenal glands are healthy and nourished during her cycle, of course, during the transition into menopause, and during, if she's trying to conceive, if she's trying to have a baby, because adrenal fatigue is often at the root of fertility issues as well. So why is adrenal fatigue a crisis in women's health? I say this all the time because I deeply believe it. Adrenal fatigue is a crisis in women's health, and that's because as women, we are encouraged today in our culture to do it all so that we can have it all and be it all, right? We want to succeed at work. We want to succeed in our family. We want to be the best friends possible. We want to have, to be there for our partners, for our parents, for our siblings, for our kids, of course. And so what does that do? That desire that we have to help each other and to be there for each other and also to be the best at work, at home, tends to drive us to try to do more, put more on our plate, try and get more done in the day. And we usually end up doing that at the expense of ourselves, of our own health. And we can't do that anymore because what it does is it burns us out over time. It bumps up those stress hormone levels. And then all of a sudden we're living with high stress hormones all day long. But here's the thing, nobody's talking about this yet. We need to talk more about why as women, we need to take better care of ourselves. Adrenal fatigue is a crisis in women's health because it's a manifestation of what happens when we live a life that is lacking in self-care and lacking in our ability to take care of ourselves and to nourish ourselves. We allow everything else to be more important than we are. And this is a lesson that I had to learn the hard way. I'm somebody who struggled with adrenal fatigue for years. I had all the symptoms, and including, the weight gain. I think I'd put on about 30 pounds more than I wanted to be carrying on my body. Couldn't lose it no matter what I did. Exhausted all day, not sleeping. Digestion was terrible. Brain fog. I couldn't remember anything. Mood issues were huge for me too. And when I realized what was going on, like I knew as a naturopathic doctor, I knew what was going on. I was like, well, of course I have adrenal fatigue, but I was having a really hard time making any changes that would stick. Making the lifestyle healthcare changes and keeping them around long enough. Because like many women, what I would do was say, oh, I can do this too. I've got all this stuff going on, but let me do this too. And for a little while I would be perfect with the diet. I'd be perfect with the exercise. I'd be perfect with my regimented sleep schedule. And then all of a sudden I wouldn't be perfect. Something would happen, right? I would go to a party or I would have to stay up late for work or something. And I would, as I say, fall off the wagon. And when I did that, I would feel horrible about myself. I would go into the guilt and shame spiral, which I think as women we're also pretty familiar with. And when that happened, I would, all the healthy lifestyle interventions that I had put in place for myself, I would let them all go. And I would start to live that less than healthy life again, fueled by coffee during the day, wine at night, skipping meals, trying to do it all at the expense of sleep and rest and stress reduction. And it took me a really long time to understand what was going on and what was really missing for me. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. I'll never forget one day I was sitting on the couch and I was just empty. I was an empty shell. I was exhausted. I was done trying to do it all. I was really, really unhappy. I had been living in a state of depression for a really long time, cycling through anxiety as well. Totally apathetic. Like I had nothing left and there was nothing I could do about it. Again, I had hit my heaviest, about 30 pounds more than I wanted to weigh. And I just remember thinking, what is going on? Why can't I make this change? Why I'm helping my patients all the time feel better. What's going on for me that I can't implement the same things that I'm helping my patients do? And so that question kind of came into the forefront of my mind that day. And then not long after that, I was going for a walk and I realized walking is it's a very meditative act for me. And it's one of the places where I do my best thinking. And I realized on a walk one day what was missing for me. And it was this whole idea of self-worth. I realized the difference between my patients and myself was this: the people who were seeking help were the people who were ready to value themselves enough to make the changes in their life. They just needed help understanding what to do. For me, I was still trying to do everything and I was making everyone else more important than myself. I was putting my health on the back burner again. And that was the difference. And when I realized, if I don't make these changes, nobody else is going to make them for me. And I'm the only one who's going to be living with the consequences of them. And I don't want to live with the consequences of them, because living with chronic stress for 20, 30, 40 years eventually is going to rob you of your vitality and your ability to enjoy life. And I'd rather live a long, healthy life that I love. And I realized, okay, I've got to make some changes in my mind first. I've got to make myself more important than everything else going on in my life. Not in a bad way or in a self-centered way, but I have to put myself first when it comes to my health. And I have to prioritize self-care. And when I did that, everything started to change. I started to have more energy. The weight started falling off. I was finally digesting again. The sleep started coming back. Blood sugar came back down into a normal range. My female hormone levels, I had also been living with estrogen dominance for a while. And so they came back into balance beautifully. And so for me, what I realized was I had been lacking in this sense of self-worth, where I was making myself more important than anything else in my life. That was the missing piece. And that is why I say adrenal fatigue is a crisis in women's health, because it's a manifestation of the fact that we're not valuing ourselves more than we're valuing everything else. But we really have to. We have the power to take back control of our health and our life, to reclaim our right to a healthy, happy life. And so that's really what I see my mission and my passion as being in this world. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit again. We're going to talk a little bit more about the physiology of adrenal glands. And so if we think kind of big picture, what do our adrenal glands do? What are they meant to do in a healthy body? Really, I always say that adrenal glands are the foundation of health. Of course, they moderate our stress response. They are intimately tied to brain function, because there's a lot of close wiring between our adrenal glands and our brains. And a really interesting thing that I love sharing with people is this. So when we were conceived and we were developing in utero, there were 3 types of tissue, and our adrenal glands actually are the only organ in our body outside of our nervous system that also come from nervous system tissue. So our adrenal glands actually do have a little bit of their own like inner brain inside of them. So they're very, very tied to our nervous system and our brains. So that's why as we live for a long time with adrenal fatigue, we also see changes in brain, not only brain function, but also brain structure. It's because of this intimate tie-in that we have with our brains and our adrenals. Our adrenal glands will promote a healthy immune response. They optimize our metabolic rate. They're very closely tied with thyroid function as well. They help us maintain a sense of youthfulness and resilience. When we live with chronic stress, it will absolutely age us more quickly than we want to. It has been shown to drive early cellular aging really quickly. Healthy adrenal glands will promote a healthy sex drive, and they will promote fertility. They promote healthy sleep, healthy digestion. They help us maintain a balanced mood. They encourage healthy blood sugar and blood pressure. So they have a lot of impact on our heart health. They support daytime energy and nighttime rest. They help to minimize things like skin rashes, early skin aging, skin sagging, and hair loss. And they also promote a healthy menstrual cycle in women while they're cycling. And then afterwards, they will help women feel healthy and resilient as they transition into menopause and then after. So now we're going to dive into the good stuff. So diet and adrenal glands. What is the connection here? How can we use food specifically to support our adrenal gland health? And I always tell people food is medicine. You know, we've known it for thousands of years, and it's very true. Diet has the power to harm us or to heal us. And so if we don't start here, we're never going to actually address the problem. So diet is key in supporting adrenal gland health. And now, big picture, a healthy diet will do all of these things. It's going to lower the burden on the adrenal glands, and we'll talk about why. It's going to reverse all of the unhealthy effects of chronic stress, I promise. Inflammation, it's going to reduce your cardiovascular disease risk. It's going to reduce digestive issues, slowed metabolism. So for women who are having a really hard time losing the weight, getting on a healthy diet is key to help to start waking her metabolism back up. Neurological issues, it can help heal our brains. And it can help reverse early cellular aging as well. A healthy diet will decrease the toxic load that tends to occur in stress and adrenal fatigue. When we're living in a state of chronic stress and adrenal fatigue, we will hold onto toxins in our cells more easily than we would otherwise. And that's because chronic stress and chronically high stress hormones don't allow our bodies to go into that rest and digest mode where we are naturally doing more detoxification. And diet is a key step in shifting us into a state where we're better able to reduce toxic load and relieve our body of toxins that can accumulate. There are some key dietary interventions as well that can actually support healthy sleep, hormone balance. They can increase our metabolic rate. They can optimize brain function. Again, as I mentioned, they support detoxification and digestion. So diet is actually extremely powerful in helping to heal our adrenal glands. So what is the ideal diet for our adrenal glands? Typically, the ideal diet for adrenal gland health will keep our blood sugar balanced. This is huge in adrenal fatigue. It's going to provide us a wide variety of lots of vitamins and minerals, those that the adrenal glands require for proper function. It's going to reduce inflammation. And that's, as I mentioned, we'll talk a little bit about why that's so important. And it's going to promote natural energy production and metabolism. So the ideal diet for adrenal glands is really going to do all of these things. And when we get all of these pieces in place, everything starts to change. It's really amazing. And I always tell people, it sounds so simple, but it's so profound. The effects on our health of eating well are so profound. And it's really about empowering your body to do what it's meant to do. And that's what I think is so cool. We're not trying to manipulate anything. We're just nourishing ourselves and allowing our bodies to heal. So, speaking specifically, what are some key dietary interventions for adrenal health? The first is this: eating an anti-inflammatory diet. Now, I mentioned that inflammation has a big crossover with adrenal fatigue, and here's what's going on. Too many of us are living in a state of chronic inflammation, which is a silent condition typically until some kind of actual disease develops. If we can reduce inflammation, we reduce our risk of developing so many health-related issues, everything from heart disease to cancer, and some other really big, scary things that, of course, we want to avoid. So number one, eat an anti-inflammatory diet. That's because in a state of chronic inflammation, our adrenal glands sense that inflammation going on in the body. And so they're the ones that are responding to the call. In response to chronic inflammation, our adrenals will pump out stress hormones. Why is that? That's because stress hormones, one of their functions is actually to reduce inflammation. It's meant to be an adaptive survival mechanism, and it's meant to be very temporary. But when we're living with chronic stress, our bodies are constantly pumping out those stress hormones. And inflammation is a form of chronic stressor. It is a chronic physical stressor. So in response to this chronic physical stressor of inflammation, our adrenal glands are going to pump out a lot of stress hormones. So we can use diet to reduce inflammation levels in our bodies naturally. Now, I always tell people there are lots of different anti-inflammatory diets out there. Find the one that works for you. That's perfect. But big picture, we want to avoid all the big food allergens. A food sensitivity or food allergy will absolutely drive inflammation in the gut. When we have inflammation in the gut, that spirals out to the rest of our body. Every other organ in our body, system in our body, has the potential to then become inflamed, especially our brains and nervous system. We know now that there's a big connection between the inflammation in our gut and inflammation in our brain. And so we want to minimize that. And we do that by eating an anti-inflammatory diet. So we avoid common food allergens. The big ones would be gluten, dairy, and sugar. We also want to avoid processed foods. I always call processed foods low vibration foods. And that's because the intention of processed foods is to be shelf stable. So they take a lot of the vitality out of foods. We know that fresh foods will go bad if we don't eat them in time. But they're vital, right? They're healthy for us. So we're avoiding the processed foods. And that's really anything that's on the shelf, anything that is, if it's wrapped, if it has chemicals in it, if it has preservatives in it, if it has artificial colors and flavors, it's a processed food, avoid it. Go instead for the healthy, natural options. The next thing I always tell people, you want to eat a lot of plants. And some people choose to eat animal products. Some people choose to not eat animal products. And really, that is a very personal decision. But we should all be eating a lot of fruits and veggies. We should all be eating a lot of plants, because plants are vital sources of the things that our bodies need, especially our adrenals: vitamins, minerals, antioxidants. Our body needs those to stay healthy every day. Plants are also sources of fiber, and fiber is a critical piece in helping us keep our blood sugar steady. And I always tell people, when we go on that blood sugar roller coaster, our blood sugar spikes and then it dives down and spikes and dives down. That's also an adrenal stressor. Our adrenal glands will try and secrete stress hormones to help regulate blood sugar as well. And we really don't want that. So we want to eat a diet that's rich in plants and rich in fiber to help our blood sugar stay steady throughout the day. Avoiding sugar. So this might sound pretty obvious, but it's also a really profound switch that I have seen make a night and day difference in so many patients' lives. Sugar is pro-inflammatory. Sugar is a metabolic toxin, and that means when we're eating a lot of sugar, we're actually harming the parts of our bodies that drive our metabolic rate. Sugar will disrupt our blood sugar balance. So a lot of times I hear all the time from women, you know, they get that 2-3 p.m. energy crash and they're craving a coffee, they're craving something sweet. They need sugar to get them through. I hear it all the time. And so what happens is this, about 3 p.m. they eat that sugar, their blood sugar spikes and they feel great for a little while. But because our bodies don't want to have a lot of sugar in our bloodstream, sugar again is a toxin. So our body will try and clean it up as quickly as it can. It's going to cause a blood sugar dive. So ultimately she just feels terrible again and she's suddenly craving more sugar. She's craving more caffeine. So what we do is when we take the sugar out and we help her balance her blood sugar with a healthy diet that's got a lot of plants in it, it goes so far in helping her feel better and helping her maintain a healthy energy level all day. Water is so important. So we do want to drink plenty of clean filtered water every single day. Dehydration is another adrenal stressor. It's another silent adrenal stressor. And so what we want to do is give our bodies plenty of water. It's necessary for life, for metabolism, for digestion and detoxification. It's necessary for brain function. It's necessary for blood pressure. Water is actually a super important part of our daily health. And I am often asked by people, how much water should I drink? And I usually tell people this, the general rule is you want to drink half of your body weight in pounds in ounces of water. So a woman who weighs 150 pounds should drink 75 ounces of water a day. Now, if she's very active, of course, that amount would probably go up. If she is very active and sweating a lot, which is something that we really have to think about in a desert climate, especially during the summer, considering electrolyte balance is very important too, because our adrenals are also regulating electrolyte balance along with the kidneys. And usually at that point, she should probably consult either a doctor or a medical nutritionist, somebody who can really help her create a personalized plan for her. But again, in general, drinking half of your body weight in pounds in ounces of water is a great place to start. Now, we hear a lot these days about fasting being so good for us. And for many people it is. It has the potential to have a lot of health benefits. But I always tell my patients who are living with adrenal fatigue, fasting is not for you, at least not right now. Long-term fasts will stress out the adrenal glands. And so when we're starting to work together, what we need to do is have her balance her blood sugar. That's always the first thing. So that looks like eating regular meals throughout the day. I always tell people this too, there is no one right way for everyone to eat. It's all about, I think diet is a beautiful way to help us regain and reestablish our relationship with ourselves, because food is nourishment, right? And so we're relearning how to nourish ourselves, what our bodies need to be healthy. And so again, there's no one right way for everyone to eat. Some people, as I mentioned earlier, do really well with animal products. And if that's the case, make sure you're buying the highest quality animal products you can. Maybe don't buy your meat at Safeway, but go to a small local farmer or a local ranch where the animals are well cared for. I also tell people that as often as possible, eat organic animal products. And that's because pesticides, hormones, and the stress hormones from animals who have been living in unhealthy, unhappy situations their entire lives, they all build up and they end up in those products. So if you are somebody who eats dairy, make sure you're going organic, make sure you're getting your dairy products from places where the animals were well cared for and loved. Again, listen to your body too. There's no right way for everybody to eat. Listen to your body, listen to what it wants. Some people do really well with more carbs in their diet. Some people do really well with a more high protein diet or a high fat diet. The high fat diet starts to look a bit like a ketogenic diet. And again, some people do better with that than others. So listen to your body, give it what it needs, give it that nourishment. And not only is that going to help you physically, but it's also going to help begin to repair emotional health and then our relationship with ourselves. I always tell people, if you have questions about, a specific way to eat, it's really at that point best to talk with somebody who has a professional background in diet, because there are so many nuances there. So big picture diet. Eat high vibration foods that looks like healthy plants. And for those people who are eating animal products, you want to get them from animals that have been loved and well cared for and lived a happy, healthy life. You want to drink enough water. It's huge. And again, using diet to reduce inflammation. So eating an anti-inflammatory diet. Now, when I work with women who are struggling with adrenal fatigue, I like to work on the big picture, because I think that, I mentioned earlier that adrenal fatigue can show symptoms anywhere in the body. And so we really have to treat the whole body, the whole woman, and not just this one part of her when we're working with adrenal fatigue. So I take women through a 5-phase program. The first phase of the program is called Align, and that's where we really get centered in her sense of self-worth, why this is important to her, and we start to set and develop the boundaries that she's going to use to get through the rest of the program. Phase 2 is called Nourish, and that's where we heal digestion to help her body begin to actually process her food so that she can nourish every cell in her body. Phase 3 is called Detox. So then we do a detox so that she can start pulling all that stuff out of her body that's been stored there for so long, all that stuff her body no longer needs or wants. Then once she's detoxed, then we start working on rebalancing the hormones. And that's in phase 4, Balance, where we look not only at adrenal hormone health, but also at female hormones, male hormones, and that's testosterone and DHEA, which are also very, very important. And, it's a part of the hormone symphony. And then of course we look at thyroid hormones too, because they all work together. And once we go through phase 4, we move into phase 5, which is called Optimize. And we use some pretty cool functional medicine testing at this point to create a long-term plan for her, something that can kind of keep her going for years and years to come, because we're looking at how is her body programmed to function, how can we optimize that so that she's feeling good, another 6 months from now, another year from now. She knows now how to take care of herself and what her body needs. So what is next? If you are curious about how I work with my patients one-on-one, if you would like to talk a little bit about what's been going on for you, see if maybe I can help, I would encourage you to schedule a discovery call. That is a free 20-minute call, and that's where we get to talk a little bit about what you've been experiencing, what's been going on for you, and how I can help you feel better. I also have created a free adrenal fatigue quiz, because a lot of people just aren't sure if they are living with adrenal fatigue or not. So if that's something you'd like to do, I have the link to it here. I'm also going to pop it into the chat in just a second. But the adrenal fatigue quiz is really an excellent way to just start to understand, well, where am I on the spectrum? Because again, adrenal fatigue is something that happens over a long period of time. And a woman in stage 1 of adrenal fatigue is going to be feeling very differently than a woman in stage 3 of adrenal fatigue. By the time she gets to stage or level 3 adrenal fatigue, she's a shell of a person. She's really feeling awful. And at that point, some kind of intervention is absolutely necessary if she's going to reclaim her health, if she's going to reclaim her life and be able to enjoy her life again. So this quiz, I think, is a really great place to start for people who are having questions about, is this something that I'm living with? So I'm going to go ahead and stop the share so that I can pop that into the chat box for you. And there we go. So that is the link to the quiz that you see in the chat right there. At this point, does anybody have any questions for me? Has anything come up that you would like me to address? I did have one question that was sent by somebody prior to our class today, which I thought was really great. She was asking about, because I've talked a lot about, that belly fat that can accumulate in adrenal fatigue, and it's that really frustrating kind of central fat that's really hard for women to lose. And she was saying, well, is diet going to be enough to help get rid of that belly fat? And I always say it's the first step. It's the necessary first step in starting to promote weight loss. And that's because when we get on a healthy diet, we're promoting metabolism again. We're promoting detoxification. We're also helping to rebalance cortisol. Cortisol is one of those stress hormones, and it's a big driver of the belly fat that develops and the belly fat that sticks around, and that's really hard to lose. And we can use diet to actually help manipulate and lower cortisol levels in a healthy way to help her supercharge that weight loss process. And I saw it in myself too. So I know this works. Okay, so I would like to thank you all so much for joining me. Again, you can schedule a call with me if you would like to talk a little bit more about this. I'll send out a link with the replay, and you also can take the quiz if you'd like. The link is in the bio or in the chat box there, and I will send that out for you as well. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a beautiful day. Take care and do something good for yourself today. Thank you so much. Thank you.